Zach, I am on the edge of my seat,
Oh man.
wanting to hear about how the singles out there are going to find their spouse and then invite you to the wedding.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I love how you're introducing me as like the dating expert, and I'm like, if they knew anything about my life before I got married around dating, they'd be like, "Yeah, you're not qualified." That's why I read books. So let's talk about that. so.
Welcome everyone to the Lion Counseling Podcast. I'm Mark Odland, founder of Lion Counseling and certified EMDR Therapist.
And I'm Zach. I'm a counselor and a coach.
And our mission is to help men to break free, to heal deep, and to become the lions they were created to be. Today, we're talking about how to find a spouse. Zach is our resident dating expert. No, I'm kidding. We got some ideas for you. On how to find that special someone, and that is not an easy task today. So make sure to hang on to the end. We got some tips and tricks. Obviously, no guarantees, but we're hoping that it's helpful for you guys. And if you're looking for support, as always, check us out at escapethecagenow.com or look at the link in the description box. Zach, I am on the edge of my seat.
Oh man.
Wanting to hear about how the singles out there are going to find their spouse and then invite you to the wedding.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I love how you're introducing me as like the dating expert, and I'm like, if they knew anything about my life before I got married around dating, they'd be like, "Yeah, you're not qualified." That's why I read books. So let's talk about that. A lot of my clients were coming to me when I was talking to Mark about doing this subject today. I just kept having clients that were coming in asking me about dating, and I'm like, well, what does the science show? What are general principles that are super helpful? Because I think there's so much information out there, and I really wanted to know, like, what is something people can grasp onto? And I read a few books, and I came across a guy named Tai Tashiro, and he wrote a book called The Science of Happily Ever After. And I just was like, this guy's a genius. This guy's awesome. And so just to kind of get us started, Mark, he told this story or gave this example of, let's say you have 100 men in a room, and this woman walks in and all the men are attracted to her. So she gets to take her pick. If she says, I want the guy that I'm going to be with to be 6 foot or above, suddenly you're going to take 60 of those guys and you're going to get rid of them. So you're left with 40 dudes. If she then says, I want the guy to be a Republican or a Democrat or independent, whatever political party she's with, you're then going to take 30 more guys and get rid of those guys. So you're left with 10 men. If she then says, I want to be married to a doctor, you're either going to eliminate all the rest of the men or only be left with one guy or like a percentage of a guy statistically, right? Yeah. And so the point that he was trying to make in the book was, you can have as many wishes as you want, but you really get like a big top 3, right? And each person gets to choose their big top 3. Yep. And then he makes his way through the book to kind of talk about what are the things to avoid, what are the things to pay attention for, right? Sure. So today we're going to talk about the science and what typically does not make a good long-term partner or a good long-term spouse, and what does. There are some things that work really well in the short term in attraction, and some things that work better in the long term. And so if you're listening right now and you want a committed partner, you want a person who's going to be a spouse, a husband, a wife in the long term, what should you be looking for? And that's kind of what we're going to dig into today. Before I keep going, Mark, and talk about the traits that we want that may not matter as much, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by where you're going with this, because I immediately hear when you gave that story, right? Mm-hmm. People listening say, what are you saying, Zach? Are you saying that I should settle? Are you saying that I should? And that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because I think it's important to keep high standards, but also to be realistic about what the field is, right? There's some people, as you know, who even talked about the economy, the marketplace, right? When it comes to dating. And there are some real ways that women and men in their own ways can be a little delusional about what's out there. And so, yeah, that's a whole nother discussion, but I just want to keep hearing more, Zach.
Let's dig in. Well, so what are the traits that people think matter that may not matter as much in the long term? So first off, what men, based on the stats, what men look for, two things. One of them surprised me, the other didn't. First thing is physical attractiveness. Didn't surprise me. Men typically are looking for how hot can I get a person, to be my romantic partner, right? How I want the hottest woman I can find, right? The second thing was socioeconomic status, which actually surprised me. So apparently men statistically are looking for a certain amount of income from the person that they're going to be with. And for women, it's the reverse. First, they're looking for socioeconomic status. Once again, didn't surprise me. And then secondarily is looks, right? So what the science shows in the long term is that physical attractiveness is helpful in dating. It's helpful in the first couple years of marriage. And then its return on investment just drops off a cliff. Same with money. So money can be very attractive initially, but once you make around $80,000, anything that you go above that doesn't have any kind of return on investment in the relationship. Yeah, you get nicer stuff, but it doesn't show any kind of correlation with more happiness in a marriage, right? So these things that really work on the front end tend not to work in the medium to long term. So those are the traits that we think matter a lot that actually end up not mattering as much as we believe them to. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, no, I hear the voice of one of my old religion professors in my head. And he said, you know why God gives us hormones, right? And are so into attraction at the beginning? It's to trick us into getting married and having babies. Because God likes babies. God likes families. He's like, oh, that's an interesting take. That's God tricking us. I'm not sure if I'd spin it quite that way, but but it's interesting. I was actually a little surprised when you talked about guys wanting being interested in this in the earning potential of their wives, because I've also heard a lot of guys say, at the end of the day, I don't really care how much she makes. I just want a peaceful home. I just want a good mother for my children. And I wonder if over time those things the scales start to tip a little bit, and maybe as guys get older, some of those values or core values or priorities start to change. Probably both for guys and gals, right? Like what's most important.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I was talking to a client recently about dating, and when I was single, looks was definitely in my top 3 for sure. Like I wasn't immune to that. What I am finding now is that looks are less important to me than my wife being a good mom. Like that's 100% in my top 3. Right. And like past Zach didn't know what that experience would feel like. And so as we get into it, we're getting a little ahead. But as we get into it, we want to look at what are the top 3 that will last me a lifetime. Right. Because hotness is going to be really great at the beginning. But what happens when you're 70 or 80? You're going to be thinking less of hotness and more of like, is there peace in our home? Like you said, your clients are saying, like, is she a good grandmother? Has she been a good mom? Like, are my kids not messed up? Is her mental health good? Right? Is she always criticizing me? So like, there's all these kinds of things that, once again, I'm getting a little ahead of myself on. But yeah, I think you're right, Mark, that I think our top 3 can change over time. So looking at the totality is the way to go if you're looking for, a spouse that you're going to be with forever. So,
go
ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Zach, I mean, that just, and maybe again, you're going to tackle this in a minute, but that idea of maybe some of the guys out there listening are like, can I really trust chemistry? Can I really trust chemistry, that initial attraction? Is that enough to take the next step forward, right? And I just think about one of Jordan Peterson's lectures where he's like, you don't really want the 10 out of 10. Like, because if you get the 10 out of 10, that's not a relationship that's going to last necessarily, right? There's all sorts of reasons why. And Jordan, he had this funny way of putting it. He's like, it might be wiser if you chose a sturdier woman with values, right? I'm not sure what that means, Jordan. Like, are you saying, like, but I think at the end of the day, right, we're hoping that we find someone we're attracted to,
Mm-hmm.
and someone who shares our values, and someone. But I don't want to get ahead of too much. So let's go to the next thing, Zach.
Yeah, well, and yeah, let's get into it. So let's start with what to avoid. We'll get to what to look for typically. And once again, you listening out there, you're the one that's going to be married to him. So you get to pick what your top 3 is. And if you say this is nonsense.
Zach, I would rather go the route of take Zach's advice and blame him if it doesn't.
Perfect. That's not the counselor way. The counselor way is I'm gonna let you choose, and then no responsibility on my end. So what should we typically want to avoid? Well, there's new studies out talking about the dark triad traits. Okay, so this is narcissism, Machiavellianism, hopefully I said that right, and psychopathy. Yep. So what is narcissism? Well, the signs of narcissism is grandiosity, having a big ego, lots of pride, lack of empathy, right? So you want to try to avoid a person that tends towards narcissism. Machiavellianism, what is that? Well, that's manipulation, like a person who is manipulative. They have emotional detachment, right? They're not trying to connect with you emotionally. And they put their self-interest over the interest of others, right? Lastly, psychopathy is being impulsive, having antisocial behavior, a callousness, and a lack of remorse. So what you'll see if you look at all 3 of those things is there's a commonality of lack of empathy. And I can't tell you how many guys that come to me that have problems in their relationship, and oftentimes it's because the woman they're with has no empathy for them. She's always in the right, they're always in the wrong, right? And this can be reversed as well. So if you're listening to this and you're the person with the lack of empathy, it's something you're going to want to work on so that your partner wants to stay with you, right? So those are the 3 big dark triad traits that we want to completely avoid at all costs. So the rule of thumb that is very famous is you go out to a date with this person. How do they treat the waiter, right? When you're out in public with them, how do they treat people? Because give it some time. They may be nice to you now, but give it some time. Chances are they act that way to you. Any thoughts on that so far?
That's really interesting. I don't know if this is implicit in what you're saying, Zach, but is the reason we need to, is part of the reason we need to be aware of the triad traits because in some way they actually can be initially attractive, or is it more we just don't see them?
They can be initially attractive.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So there are traits like for instance, if a woman is attracted to a guy with lots of power.
Right.
Right. So not always, but many men who seek power have these traits. Like, I'm going to win at all costs. I'm going to be successful. Right. And as far as like procreating and having kids and being able to take care of those kids, oh, he's powerful. He's got a lot of money. Right. That's very attractive. So we do need to watch out for these traits because there can be like there's something attractive about a little bit of danger. Right. There's also the rose colored glasses thing where literally I was just talking to a client recently who was dating a woman. He's like, yeah, she was a 9 out of 10. It was hard to break up with her, man, because she had some of these traits and he was blinded by her beauty. And it's like, it was really hard. There was an ego thing there. Like, hey, walking into a room with this woman on my arm shows I'm somebody. And so we'll also ignore these traits. So even if we're not attracted to it, we might also ignore them if there's some other benefits we're getting.
Sure.
So we don't want to ignore them because in the long term, it'll be highly destructive. Great question, Mark. Next, attachment styles. So we really want to pay attention to attachment styles. If you haven't heard of this, you might want to do a little bit of research in attachment styles, and maybe we'll do a podcast on it at some point. But essentially there are 3 main. I've also heard 4 main, so we'll discuss 4. But essentially secure attachment, avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and then some people are anxious avoidant. And so we'll get into this. So if you're watching a movie, the stereotypical jock who has the girls after him and they're like, oh, why won't you call me your girlfriend? And they're like, oh, baby, I'm just not trying to put labels on it. Like that dude, he's like avoiding closeness, right? He's avoiding the connection, right? And so if a problem happens in the relationship, what does he do? He runs away. He's like, I don't want to deal with this. Why do we have to talk about this? Let's sweep it under the rug, right? That tends to be avoidant. Next, we have anxious, right? And so once again, stereotype. It's you're dating this girl and she texts you 5 minutes later, you haven't responded because you're at work, and then she blows up your phone with 30 or 40 texts saying, why aren't you talking to me? And you're like, because I'm in a business meeting, right? That is more of an anxious style, right? Clingy, needs reassurance, that kind of thing. Now, I'm being overly exaggerative, if that's a word. I'm overly exaggerating this to kind of like make the point. Because we do need to have empathy for people in these situations, because usually it stems from childhood, right? So abandonment issues, neglect, these kinds of things can cause these attachment styles.
Yeah.
And it can be the reverse. So it's not that women are always the anxious ones and dudes are always the avoidant. I'm just listing stereotypes for the sake of the example. But it can be either one. So guys can be anxious and women can be avoidant. It can go either way. Lastly, we have anxious avoidant, which is kind of the push-pull, where at some points they're very clingy, and at other points they're like, I don't want anything to do with you, right? I just want to stay away from you, right? So these are the kinds of things we need to be careful around. I'm not saying you can't date or get married to a person with this, but are they working on this thing, right? We do want to be careful. Go ahead.
No, that you took the words out of my mouth, Zach. I mean, I think that is the big thing that I've seen with doing premarital counseling, doing marriage counseling, is that some of these things are overcomable, but you can't be like, I'm going to change this person. That doesn't work, and often they don't. But if they're the kind of person who has a mindset of continuing to heal, continuing to grow, being open to facing hard things, that is so much more hopeful, right? Because then you're on this journey together where you do have the hard conversations. You do get counseling when you need it. You do go to the gym when you need to get back on track, right? It's just a whole different mindset. And the other thing I'd say is, like, for that, jock analogy, it could be an attachment style, or it really could be a guy too, who's just like, I just want to keep my options open. And then on the flip side, the other person has to be like, okay, do I want to be with a guy or a gal who wants to keep their options open? And so it's it's kind of like everyone has their own standards, and you have to kind of know where your line in the sand is and what you're willing to tolerate, and be really honest about it.
Yeah, well said. So kind of shooting off what you're saying. So a couple side thoughts before we move into the traits that actually matter long term. Let me double down on what you said. You can't just rely on hope or assume that the person will change. Have they shown signs? Are they working on it? So I thought that point you made was perfect, because you don't want to discount people who are willing to try to make those changes. And it's just, are you willing to be patient around it? Are you willing to wait and grow with them? Because you probably have things that you need to grow in as well. The second thing is that, like, oftentimes we talk about red flags and say, like, oh, they can't have any red flags. That's not necessarily true, because oftentimes a red flag or two, not 10, but a red flag or two, depending on what they are in a relationship at the beginning, if you guys have to work through that before you get married, actually will show you, what do we do in a relationship together when we have things that are really bugging us in the relationship? Are we able to work through the red flags or not? So some people don't get that opportunity. Everything is smooth sailing. Everything is great. And then all of a sudden, 5 or 10 years down the road, something major happens, and they're like, well, who is this person? Right? Because you didn't get a chance to actually work through it. So don't discount the person just because they have a red flag or two, right? As long as you're, I've listed the things you really want to be careful around. But if it's other things, try to see if you can figure it out with them.
That's great, Zach.
Yeah, last thought, and then I'll see if you have any final thoughts, Mark, is that any person you date or get married to are going to have problems. And you get the benefit of picking the problems you're willing to deal with.
Hey, there we go.
You get to pick. No one else gets to pick. And so if some people are like, oh, don't you notice that she has this thing going on? It's like, If you don't mind it or you're willing to overcome it because they have a list of really good things, cool. That sounds very healthy because we're all going to have to do that. And they're going to have to do it for you. Like they're going to have to take your red flags and say like, can I deal with this or no? Any last thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, my mind drifted back to being in college, right? And we were in this Bible study. And I remember this person said, all right, now let's pray for our future spouse. I'm like, whoa, I've never even heard of that concept. And so that was actually for our faith-based guys out there, there is something to that. It's like, I don't know who that person is yet, but God, help me not screw it up. Help me not screw it up. And again, that's the whole paradox, right? Philosophy, theology is like, is there just one? Is there a soulmate? I think you can go too far with that, right? And you can stick your head in the sand and miss out on opportunities because you can kind of hide behind your spirituality in some cases. For all we know, God has 10 people that would make an amazing spouse. And you have to step through the door and make it work with one of them. Or maybe there's the one. I don't claim to have that all solved, but I would just say that there's something about having an open heart, an open mind, also being wise, as you're reminding us today of, Zach, the things to avoid. And the last thing I would say is, besides the growth mindset, I tell my guys who are looking for a wife to say, you've got to take risks. You have to take risks, and you have to increase the probability of finding someone who has a better chance of sharing your values and is in line with kind of who you are and where you want to be. So I was very lucky in the sense that, I met my wife at a Bible camp as a camp counselor in college, and we were from the same denomination. So even though we had different backgrounds, different upbringings, there was enough similarity and enough shared values where I feel like I got lucky, right? I got lucky. And so, yes, no, the prescription isn't, all of you guys listening, find a Bible camp in northern Minnesota and become a camp counselor. That would be awkward if you're 40 years old, right, to be the camp counselor. So I don't think so. But find opportunities to take risks, put yourself in that path where there's actually a chance to meet someone who has a shot at being the kind of person that you'd want to be with. And there's a lot out of our control, but what can we do? Maximize what we can control and take a step.
I love it. I love it. Well, before we get to what should you look for in a spouse, in a future spouse, if you're listening to this and you are enjoying this conversation, please hit that like and subscribe button. Leave a comment below. Let us know, hey, what have you liked about this show, or what would you like to hear in the future? And we would just love to hear everyone's opinions, because we would love to make sure that we're continuing to make this podcast better and better. So here we go. Moment of truth. What to look for. So first off, values is big. Like, I think, and this is more personal than the research, but I personally think that making sure that the person's values align with your own is going to set you up for better long-term success, especially if you're thinking about having kids, right?
Definitely.
Because you have to make sure, like, what are we going to teach our kids? Whether it's a faith perspective, political perspective, life perspective, are you guys heading in the same direction? Or are you completely focused on career and she's completely focused on, family, right? And if you're not aligned in that, that's not going to be setting up for success. However, one of the things that the research shows is that you want to pay attention to the big 5 personality traits. And if you've never seen them before, you can look them up. The acronym is OCEAN, right? And so in the OCEAN acronym, the N stands for neuroticism. We want to make sure that, if we can, that the person that we're with is low on the neuroticism scale. What is neuroticism? That's negative emotions like anxiety, depression, worry. You want to try to have someone that's emotionally stable, so you don't feel like you're walking on eggshells all the time, right? Especially low in anger, right? Anger can be really tough to overcome, especially if they're not working on it. Like, if they're not willing to work on it, anger can really make a relationship highly difficult to stay in. Really great to have someone that's high on the agreeableness factor, right? So these are people that are kind, empathetic. Traditionally, it's called the nice guy or the nice girl, right? And in some ways, people are like, it's not good to be the nice guy. It's not good to be the nice girl. It's kind of an insult if you're called nice. There might be some truth to it, but at the same time, having a person that you're married to in the long term that is willing to serve you, that is willing to focus on you, is super beneficial in a relationship. And it's especially beneficial if both people are that way to each other, right? That are able to put the other person above themselves. We were talking about attachments earlier. So we talked about anxious, avoidant, when you put the words together. But there's also secure attachment. So secure attachment is a person that feels safe, they're consistent, they're not overly clingy or distant, right? One of the things I meant to mention earlier with attachment is there's also a spectrum. Like, it doesn't mean that you're like 100% in one of these categories. So when my wife and I got together, I was a little bit on the avoidant side. She was a little bit on the anxious side, right? And we had to negotiate. We had to use a lot of Gottman strategies of like, hey, sometimes I need to take a pause, but I'm going to come back and talk to you about this. And she had to negotiate and say like, okay, I'm willing to pause, but you need to make sure you bring it back up to me, right? And so that was the negotiation we had. So that ended up moving us both to the middle, where it's healthier that some problems we do let go and other problems we have to engage in. So secure attachment, working towards that, super important in a spouse. Last thing is low sensation seeking. Right? So the person that's always looking for that adrenaline high, right? Really fun in dating. Not as fun when they cheat on you 5 years later, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to cheat on you, but a normal, suburban working 9-to-5 job, like if that's the kind of thing you desire in life, and this person is really looking for that adrenaline all the time, that's going to make a healthier relationship more difficult in the long term.
Sure.
So those are the major points I had on my end, Mark. Did you have anything on your end that you would suggest people look for?
Yeah, I think I love all that, Zach. I mean, it's so fascinating to think about that. I mean, I think so many guys just lead with pure chemistry, and they don't give any of this much thought. And it is good to get our thinking brains online and really evaluate some of these things. Not to be so picky that we eliminate the whole pool from possibility, but to say, okay, how can I be realistic? How can I avoid the biggest red flags or the most significant accumulation of red flags? How can I look for these positive traits? How can I look for those shared values? And then at the end of the day, with good counsel, with wise counsel, with your heart, with your mind, at the end of the day, you got to take a step. You got to take a step. And with God's help, with the support of family, with our own commitment to saying, you know what I'm embracing here is loving this person, working hard on our relationship. Until death do us part does not mean we're going to be miserable until we die. It means until the day I die, I'm going to keep loving this person even when I don't feel like it. I'm going to love this person when it's more of an action than a feeling. It feels more like a choice. And I'm going to trust that the feelings are going to come back. The feelings are going to come back, and we're going to build an awesome life together. And I know that there are situations where that's not possible in this broken world, but at the end of the day, we make the best decision we can, and then we have to take that calculated risk / leap of faith and go for it.
That's so good. Well, if you're listening to this and you're like, where can I start? I got a brief thing that you can do that I think would be highly beneficial to just get you started on moving you towards beginning to date someone. So very helpful to make a list of the traits you are looking for. So if some of the things hit home today that we were talking about, okay, make your list of things. If it's 10 things, 20 things you want, 30 things you want, cool. List out as many things you want on a sheet of paper as you want. However, you need to identify those top 3 things. What are the top 3? And when I did this with a client recently, he was like, oh yeah, looks is in my top 3. The guy that was dating the woman he said was a 9 out of 10. He's like, oh yeah, looks is in my top 3. And I was like, really? What broke you guys up? He's like, essentially, she was avoidant. So she was avoiding conflict. She was avoiding him. She was working too much, and he was just wanting to connect with her. He's like, yeah, I was more anxious in the attachment style. I just really wanted to be with her. I worked on myself, and I like kind of let her have some space. He was working on himself and like trying not to be too clingy. But ultimately, she just kept avoiding. I was like, okay, so would you actually have looks over, if the next person you date has the looks but is still avoidant, would you continue to date them? He's like, no. I was like, oh, I mean, it sounds like looks isn't in your top 3 then. So the reason I tell that story is that you actually want to think this through. Yeah. And say like, would I actually want this trait above this trait over here, or above this trait over here? If the person wasn't healthy mentally, am I willing to, date her even if she is a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 or whatever, right? So that's my challenge to you. And then have your 3 things, and then that's what you begin to pay attention for. That's what you begin to look for when you're looking for that future spouse, that future romantic partner. Cool, everybody. Any last thoughts, Mark?
No, that's you got the thoughts, you got the mind spinning, Zach. I think there's a lot to chew on for our listeners today, and if nothing else, it's going to prime the pump to take an honest look and do some self-reflection, and maybe re-examine how they're even looking at the situation, and it might be a wake-up call for some guys. So I really appreciate you sharing what you did today, Zach, and as always, if you guys want to drop a comment below and just let us know what you thought about today's episode and ideas for future episodes. We would love to hear those ideas, respond, and keep things rolling. So
yeah, and if you're looking for help, just reach out to us at escapethecagenow.com or in the link in the description box below. All right, thanks everybody.
All right, thanks guys. Bye.
Thanks.